Hi, everyone. So we are live now. Is everyone here? If yes, we can start.
Okay, let's do a final roll call. For Gimana Lu Aja Deh Kak, Kushai and Satrio, are you here?
Satrio present.
Present.
Okay. For Something's Rising and It's Not, The Shield Hero, Batara and Firman, are you here?
Both here.
Okay. For CG, we have Seksi, Konsumsi, Atma Open Online, Keisha and Josephine, are you here?
Yes, we're here.
And CO, Duo Babi Asap, Bobby and Daud, are you here?
Here.
Okay, and roll call for adjudicators. Felicia Flynn is here. Alkindi. Alkindi is here. Okay, and Kalis Khalid, are you there?
Yep, here.
Okay, Sandi Sanjaya.
You.
And Shannon, is here? Here. Okay, so everyone is here, and welcome guys to the semi-final round of Atma Open 2020. Congratulations for making it this far, and we are getting under the motions. This house would create a market for the buying and selling of citizenship. Without further ado, we call upon Prime Minister here.
Hello, am I audible?
Yep.
Okay, udah. Can I start? Judges?
Yep.
Yeah.
You're ready.
Okay, cool. I'm going to start
Yeah,
in
push.
3. Okay. I'm going to start. I'm going to start in 3, 2, 1. This debate is talking about a state and how do we utilize immigration as a tool to create a just, fair, and stable governance in society. In the status quo right now, we already have restrictions and like tools that government artificially uses to modify how immigration is like. For instance, point-based immigration in the United Kingdom, in which you need to fulfill a certain educational requirements before you can proceed to become a UK citizenship to begin with. In some other countries, you need to literally invest money for a certain period of time before you can be accepted to become a citizen of the country in the first place. Under open government, we extend this by bringing a mechanism of cold hard cash, and by that we have 3 points of models. Number 1 is just the usual. This will be the extension of the status quo, in which we allow people to sell money or asset in exchange of their citizenship. And second of all, in the cases in which how does this markets work, right? What happens if you sell your citizenship? Like obviously, it's unrealistic for us to say that people will be stateless. Therefore, the likelihood is that if people wanted to sell their citizenship, it's likely for them to be accepted to another country in the first place. Therefore, they like to quote unquote exchange or like exchange their citizenship to the kind of people they want to sell the citizenship to. So that's where the transaction comes in. And lastly, and most importantly, notice that we are not going to eliminate other mechanisms under our city house. This policy will be done in conjunction with other things. So for instance, if some country only allows people who are people who have a certain amount of education to enter, for example, that mechanism will still remain in place. It's still going to be different by state to state. Note that this is justified because the motion does not eliminate the other mechanisms that we have in the status quo. Just like literally any other markets, it is not anarcho-capitalism, okay? There is literally restrictions that are put in place in literally any other markets, like for example, house pricing, you put house caps. We don't think that this is any different. With that in mind, I'm going to talk about 2 things. Number 1, I'm going to talk about why this is justified in the state to do, because this facilitates further the ability of people to move their citizenship. Secondly, I'm going to talk about nation building, on why there are exclusive features of hard cold cash that other mechanisms will not be able to provide at the end of the day. But before that, do I have any questions? Perfect. Let's move on to the first argument on principles, why this facilitates people to move their citizenship better. Here's the thing. I think that this debate should operate in a basis of the state already recognizing of people's right to move. We think that the state should always recognize the individual rights to express themselves, and to recognize that if a certain state does not have any political ideas that is compatible with themselves, or like the inability of them to express themselves, it should be allowed for the state to allow people to move. And that should be the basis of this debate as what is the value of the state. The problem that we have right now is that moving inherently occurs a cost, ladies and gentlemen. There is a cost of you creating visas, for instance, or like, you ensuring that you have a stable asset by the time you move on that particular country in the first place. It is about the ability for you to like ensure that you have stable finances by the time you move in those country in the first place. And this is where this mechanism comes in. And how do we change that is under two key layers. Number one is because under RCDDAFs, the state will facilitate the contract that is made between people who want to exchange and sell their citizenship. Linking it back to my second point of mechanism, in which, like, let's say someone in Canada wanted to move to the United States, like they like exchange their asset they like exchange their asset to the people in the United States. In the states under our side of the house, there will be government mechanisms that are able to enforce that, because right now, without any mechanism of enforcement whatsoever, there is going to be very high likelihood for the entire transaction to be risky, right? If there is no government mechanism for us to enforce, like the ability for you to like to give the assets on time, or like to give the assets with all of its with all of its terms and conditions properly, for example, it is going to be so damaging by the time those people have by the time those people have moved in the first place. And that's the first reason. And second reason is because money itself is something that is very important, ladies and gentlemen. Like I've stated to you, I've stated this to you before, that oftentimes the ability for you to like move and it's going by the ability for you to move and have a stable life in your new country is contingent towards your ability to have stable assets there. By the time we allow people to exchange their citizenship and exchanging their asset in exchange of like them switching their citizenship in the first place, we say that is completely justified. Then the question becomes, why can't you just relinquish their citizenship there? Like, this might be the question coming from the opposition side of the house. Do note that right now the state already allows the ability of people to move anyway, right? So therefore, it's just an extension of the status quo. But the additional benefit is that we have government mechanism to enforce the contract, and that because we like oversee how the circulation of money is, the additional benefit will happen better on our side of the house. This is principally justified for the state to do. That concludes my first argument. Second argument, then let's talk about what is the exclusive benefits of money. There are two key layers here. Number one, as I've stated to you before, by the time you move, it's going to require a certain amount of asset, but before you can fully actualize your potential as a citizen. Because, like, for example, if you just move from Indonesia to Canada, but you don't have like a huge amount of money, it's going to be likely for you to like accumulate money first to have a stable asset, to have a stable house, and so on and so forth. Under our side of the house, by the time you already have those assets in the first place, we say that you can fully focus yourself to create businesses or like to contribute actually to society. So we say that the benefits of the status quo is extended under our side of the house. But second of all, the benefit of pure hard cash in the other scenarios by which this transaction occurs is that, do note that sometimes skill or like investment is something that is very long term, ladies and gentlemen. And under our side of the house, in the time in which the transaction does not come in the form of exchange of asset, but rather than comes in forms of hard code cash, for instance, then the ability of the state to use that hard code cash to directly use it to any of their interests is going to be bigger under our side of the house. Like, this is just a parallel to normal taxation, right? Because do note that in some areas of the state, hard code cash is required. Like, for example, you have a lot of areas which are, for example, in the status quo, are rampaged by COVID-19, for instance, or even on a less extreme case, like they suffer from economic downturns of a certain industry of that is collapsing, and so on and so forth. Like, all of these things required hard code cash for it to stimulate all of those areas in the first place. Long-term benefit is not the only tool, and it's not the only thing that benefits the state. Sometimes hard code cash is literally the other side of the coin that we should prioritize as well under our side of the house. This policy is an extension of the status quo. It is justified for us to regulate how people transact their citizenship. This is also will translate to a huge amount of benefit in the sense that hard code cash is uniquely important. We are very proud to propose.
Okay, thank you, Kush, for the speech. To open the case of opposition bench, we call LO. Here.
Am I audible?
Yep.
Yeah.
Cool. I might not going to turn on my video because my connection is a little bit unstable. Is it okay? I'll start in. Wait.
Committee, is that okay? I think.
Yeah, is it okay?
Yep, it's fine.
Cool. I'll start in 3, 2, 1. It's regrettable that opening government are living in an utopic world where everyone can move, and they didn't even analyze a little bit in terms of pricing how countries that will be flocked into will be rich countries, and it will be dominated by customers that is actually rich to begin with. So people who are vulnerable are unable to move, and their countries become even worse because people who are actually capable in the country will move. What do we want? We want status quo. We think that the ability for you to actually, if you want to have better citizenship and go move out, we still have prerequisites, and people who are capable can still do it. And people who are actually don't want to do it and still want to live in their country, we want their countries to be better, ladies and gentlemen. We think that policy will only worsen the status quo and will make people unable to seek better benefit in their life. 3 responses. 1, governments say that it's an extension of current status quo mechanism in which people who are capable can move. Then what is the difference? We think that the people who want to go in that context are rich people to begin with. So if they have much money to begin with, I don't think it's a marginal change, because to begin with, they can still opt into this option. But think governments say that the benefit of pure hard cash is good because the ability of that state to utilize it will be much better. Yes, we can see this can happen, but this will only benefit the rich countries, because the countries that will be able to get this hard cash are going to be countries that can get so much customers and can get the flocking of this citizenship and can get these kinds of hard cash. So we don't think it's a marginal change also and marginal benefit in that sense. Lastly, they say that the state also, through their mechanism, will be able to create a facilitation in terms of transactions, so the riskiness of it is going to be ideal later. I don't think it's going to be that ideal. Why? Especially, I think that in the current status quo, in terms of calculation, I don't think that people are able to calculate into the long term in terms of whether or not they're able to survive in that country. Or secondly, I don't think if you are going to move into countries that are less established, these kinds of facilitation are going to be that ideal to the extent where people understand that that country is not that good enough, in which I will explain later in my argument why that's going to be important. 2 arguments. 1, pricing will not be accessible. 2, developing countries will be worsened. 1, pricing will not be accessible. 2 reasons. First, we think that the price of countries that have good resource and living conditions will be expensive. The rich of the world and most middle class to higher class will flock to these countries that will create the surge of prices. Sure, there are mid-tier countries too, I assume, that can be the market demand, but I still think it's not enough, because the middle class will also dominate the market, and it will flock these kinds of pricing, and the pricing will still go up. Secondly, people in lower countries that have lack in resource and low in value won't be able to live anyway, because the price to sell their citizenship will be very low. So I don't think they have the ability to actually move out, because if they sell their citizenship, it's not going to be that beneficial for them. What are the implications for this? 1, nothing will change. They won't be able to afford to go to a new country that is better for themselves. So I don't think that government's benefit manifests at all. But secondly, even if in a world where we are living in a middle to higher country and we are not going to move and people go into our country, the competition will become more flooded, because the influx of middle to higher class individuals makes it our ability to climb up the corporate ladder and gain more ability to gain jobs will be much harder, because so much people are getting in. So I don't think our ability to gain traction is going to be better. Sure, poor people in rich countries might be able to sell their citizenship, but we think that option have after they are selling their citizenship is very limited and are not going to be better for the status quo. So what are the alternatives? 1, they will go to a poor and impoverished countries, because the higher class countries are very expensive. And secondly, middle class countries are filled with most of the middle class. This is bad, even though in the current status quo, it might be good in the short term because they might have a lot of money, but in terms of development and opportunities, it's going to be very lacking, especially in terms of jobs and educations. So why most likely they will be unable to rationalize this option, the poor people that is in rich countries and will go out, because they are being influenced by this large sum of money. I don't want to be filing an equity, but I think that poor people most likely are easily influenced when they are being offered something that is very, very big towards them, ladies and gentlemen. They are easily influenced by politicians in the current status quo, and they are easily influenced by money politics. So I don't think that they have the capability to rationalize this, especially if they go to poorer countries. These kinds of facilitations are not going to be that ideal to begin with. While in the comparative, sometimes in rich countries, although you are being as a poor people, the impoverished are given so many help, like free education, shelters, free healthcare, because rich countries have good schemes for poor people. Poor people. The comparative is, even at best in the poor countries, they might be able in the short term gain money, but in the long term, the sustainability and development are going to be very bad. While in comparative, even in the lowest societal strata, in the poor rich countries, you are still going to have a better life, ladies and gentlemen. Second, why then, by this second argument, why most developing countries will become even worse? I have two scenarios. First scenario. So first scenario is, right now, by doing this policy, the affluent, the smart, and rich people that are sustaining and providing the country with sustainability in terms of long-term policies and so much contributions in research and development are going to leave. We say that they have a very big incentive to leave. Why? Because first, they have the money to do so. Secondly, sometimes they feel dissatisfied for their country because they have no freedom of resource and sometimes are ridden with conflicts and social economic discrepancies that sometimes the poor demonize them constantly because of their hoard of resources. This is harmful because note that realistically, a large group of people that are there are still going to be a large group of people that are going to stay in that country because they have no alternatives, because they lack money, and secondly, they already established a deep connection with their community there. The impact of this is the people in these countries will have less of an ability to create sustainable change in terms of economic policies that are relevant, leadership, and researchers that tackles impoverished country problems. Because these things are complex, I don't think that these kinds of individuals can make it by their own because the elites are going to leave. They might have an alternative by being helped by other countries, but I don't think it's a viable option. Second scenario, the elites in that country might stay because they have a deep connection with that country, such as religious beliefs and etc., and they want to cement their power even more. When this happens, this will become even worse because they can exploit their power even more because they have the legitimacy to say that if you don't like this country, you can just leave if you are as a minority. Or secondly, right now the minorities' only survivability is to get sustainable support coming from progressive people or the middle class that is actually having relatability towards them. I think when these people who are actually relatable and support them in the current status quo leave, they have no capacity to actually create demonizes or criticize the ability for the majority to oppress them even more. So I think their only way and alternative to be given support and given survivability in the current status quo becomes even worse. And in conclusion, what is happening in this developing argument, first, they will have less capacity to create complex policy, and secondly, they have less capacity to actually create check and balance towards the people who are demonizing them. I think opposition wins in terms of pricing, and white will create harm towards the most vulnerable of countries. Very proud to oppose. Thank you.
To open government weekly. I'm here.
Sorry, lagging banget. Can you repeat?
Yeah, I think Kelly was saying welcoming the Deputy Prime Minister to give the speech.
Okay, we are.
Okay, I'm just checking then. Am I audible?
Yes.
Okay.
Sorry, guys. I think Khalis is not here.
Okay,
Yeah,
I'll just wait.
he's not here. I'll just continue.
Okay.
Okay.
I already
that's
messaged
cool.
him. Hold on,
Okay, cool.
just a sec. I think someone just dropped out of the call. Yeah, we lost Feli. Can we pause for 2 minutes because the chair dropped out of the call?
Okay.
All right, Feli's here.
Yep, just reconnect. And anyone else already here?
All good.
Okay.
Great. Just final check. Am I audible?
Yep.
Okay, good. Okay, I'm going to start in 3, 2, 1. Members of the House, I think it's very good that opening opposition made those arguments because because what I'm talking about, I'm going to talk about the impacts more generally to all countries, both the countries who are to which buying is more prevalent and countries with selling is more prevalent. I argue that going to be more important, equally important. Second, I'm going to talk about additional benefits to the state, and third, finally, I'm going to talk about the freedom of contract, that we should protect these individuals because it's part of their contractual freedom. Rebuttals will be integrated. So we want to talk about imbalances and differences between states, indeed. And we recognize, of course, that these things do happen. Countries, for example, like advanced democracies with very rich countries will likely have a lot of people interested in buying their citizenship. But that's the beauty of the market itself, isn't it? Therefore, these individuals, these states are going, the price of their citizenship is going to be very high. And the people who are likely to be interested in moving in countries whose development index is lower will be the people who in the developed country themselves are having economic problems in the first place. We argue that this is actually very positive for the individuals who are poor and who are poor in rich countries themselves. Why? For several reasons. First, there is a possible scenario in the reason why they are poor is because they're discriminated against in their source countries, and in the countries of the destination countries, they're not discriminated against. So now you have a financial help, you have assistance from the individuals who are buying your citizenship in terms of money, and you move to a country that does not discriminate against you. It will be very important for these individuals. It will be very helpful for these individuals to establish themselves in a better life, for example. So that's one possibility. Second possibility, indeed, is that those individuals are unable to compete because their skill sets are not available, are available in a high level in the rich countries, but their skill sets are available in demand in other countries, and that is another scenario in which individuals are possibly able to benefit when they're selling their citizenships. Yeah, sure.
Won't those countries that are not discriminative also have a really high price on their citizenships, making the net benefit of cold hard cash very low?
Not necessarily. Not necessarily. For example, if you move from the United States to China, there is a very strong anti-black discrimination in the United States. While I understand that there is some anti-black discrimination again in China, that level is likely to be much less systemic than the U.S. It is very likely that people are going to be more successful there, for example. So that scenario is not necessarily true. We are going to also say that. Even in some kind of generalized non-scenario based, note that just because it's not a non-scenario doesn't mean it's majority. But if we remove all these notions, then we can say, for example, that for these poor people who sell citizenship, actually the value of them being from advanced democracies, from countries with a lot of money, means that this money purchases a lot more goods and services for these individuals when they move to a countries who are less developed. What does this mean? Of course, maybe these poor people are going to have problems in the less developed countries as well. However, their current situation is actually an improvement from the situation when they live in developed countries. They say, for example, in developed countries there are guarantees and so on and so on. But I say that if these guarantees are available, why are these people still poor? Why are these people still less advantaged? Because this guarantees doesn't work for these individuals. So having this ability to be individual to have a fresh start is actually beneficial for them. Moreover, I say that in this regard, we also need to understand the importance of consent in this regard. If these individuals think that they can improve their future by moving to a less developed country but getting a lot more money, who are we to say that they are always wrong? Why are we so insulting to them and saying that they are going to be tricked by these rich people and so on? I don't agree and I don't accept that characterization. if rich people move here, of course, they also bid up resources and indeed creates competition for those resources. But they also create investment and development for these individuals. In fact, a curious argument about opening opposition is this seems to be an argument against all immigration. Why? Because even immigration of rich people who are contributing to the country, is considered to be bad. Therefore, they are arguing against all kinds of immigration, which is not something that we should accept in this debate. Okay. Moreover, we say that when rich people buy citizenship, they not necessarily are going to stay and then abandon their country where they're coming from, because it's possible, for example, that they just want the protection of the passport, for example. Second, they may want to safe haven, but they still conduct economic exchange in the country, right? Moreover, again, there is also a question of rights here. Why is it the duty for the rich people to contribute to the country in which they are so uncomfortable, they want to change their citizenship? Right? If they believe that they are not safe, if they believe that they are not protected by this country, if they believe that their assets are not protected by this country, why do they have the duty to contribute to a state that mistreats them? Right? So the opening opposition's idea seems to be that these individuals are only valuable to the state because they provide certain amount of money to the state that benefits the value of this country. But the reason why they move is much more important and much more central to the rights of these individuals rather than this contribution that they provide in this regard, which is segues neatly, I think, to the idea of this freedom of contract, members of the House. Note that in many in my second argument, note that in many countries a lot of contracts actually is not beneficial to the state, right, or value neutral to the state. We are not saying that when people are making exchange they have a duty to maximize the benefit for the government in that regard. Rather, freedom of contract comes from your right to have an exchange with another individual, and we think that this right to have an exchange with individuals have as their benefit is actually something that should be protected by the state, even if it might not be optimal from the side from the point of the view of the state. Why? Because the state exists to support their citizens, not as citizens exist to support and create the material wealth of the state. The state exists to guarantee the rights of the individuals. If there is a benefit in development of the public will, for example, that is good and right. But you cannot just trample on on the right of individuals just because you say that the state is not going to get the optimal benefit out of this, or other people are not going to get optimal benefit out of this. Why? Because this is a central part of their rights. This is why I argue from the freedom of contract. Individuals can have a contract to agree on other individuals as long as four requirements are provided: agreement, legal competence, object of exchange, and it's not illegal. On the agreement, legal competence is obvious. On the material requirement contract is where the debate is. Such individuals consider his rights as citizens an object of exchange. We argue that they can. First, because we can obtain economic value from the object. We can, in principle, alienate the object from the person. These rights, we can, of course, not exercise our right and they'll be fine. We can also, for example, lose of citizenship and this will be harmful to the individual. But under this scenario, you're not stateless, you are compensated, so this is not a problem, and we can in principle and transfer them because they are part of document and bundles of rights allowed recorded by the state. Therefore, in principle, this is an object that can be alienated by other individuals, and the reason, or the only parameter once you can be able to do this contract is that it is legal because it is protection of their rights and their needs. I spent a lot of time speaking about a lot of rights and protection is to be protected. We have to say that the opening opposition have to provide an alternative to those and not just saying that the state is going to lose out in this regard. That's why I'm very proud to propose. Thank you.
Hi, before we continue the debate, can I go to the restroom first?
Sure.
Thanks.
Wait till the judges are back.
I am back.
All right.
Okay. All right. To respond the case of OG, we call the LO. Here.
Just a sec. I think someone just dropped out.
All right.
Give 2 minutes. Sorry. Yep, we're missing Gita. Keisha, can you message her, please? Thank you.
Yeah, wait. Do you have the link?
Yep, just a sec. It's in the
Oh, in the chat? Because in the group we only have the Facebook link.
sending it to you now.
Thank you. Okay, Gita is just wait a moment.
All right, excellent. Carry on, please.
Sorry. Okay, Gita is already here. We may continue.
Okay, ready. Gonna start my speech in 3, 2, 1. Several responses to opening government's case before I move on to my extension, talking about how to provide alternatives for people who are desperate and in need of a way out, and how this is actually not accessible to them. Okay, first, government wants to talk about justification. Their only main justification was saying that the state will facilitate the contract, but they said in their setup that there will still be assets that you need to have in order to trade. That means on their side, they also have relatively privileged prerequisites in order to move to another nation. So they can't claim the benefit of poor people moving because what are they going to sell to the other nation, their house that they don't have? Second, if they want to talk about how the nation needs to get some level of money, then the status quo alternative of having visas and taxation for anyone moving here already exists anyway. So this is really not important. Thirdly, they say that at the end of the day, the state will have a say in the discussion or the mediation between two parties. That means that the state at the end of the day still has pretty much full control over who gets in and who gets out of the nation. So there's really no exclusivity for why their side has better rights in order to move to another nation. But second, talking about poor people, they said that they want, or people who are discriminated, for example, Black people in the US. One, they never rebutted the idea that if they, for example, want to go to a nation like Switzerland that is not that racist, that's going to have a really high price anyway, so no benefit of cold hard cash, and they have to add the cost of moving there and setting up their new life. Second, I don't think it's really true that China is better for Black people because it isn't like they're not even good to Chinese people. How do you expect them to be good against Black people, right? So really not clear. So on their side of the house, it's not clear why someone who has been discriminated in their country can move to another country that is not discriminated without paying a lot of money, because their target nation that is totally awesome for them as a minority will have a high cost as well. So it's not likely that there's going to be any money left on the table once they pay for this new citizenship. What do they have instead? Black people in the US, we say, even if they have the option to move, many people are still poor and many people will still stay there. So at the end of the day, those people will be discriminated even more because they are now seen as people who have the option to get out of the US, but they chose to stay. Now, the people in the US, especially the racist community, have the justification of saying, well, these Black people shouldn't stay here anyway, they have the option. If they don't want to be discriminated by us, then go leave with your fellow brothers. So we say at the end of the day, this only increases their oppression more because now they have even less of a capacity to say, we are also Americans. They will be seen as a citizen of Earth and they could have moved elsewhere. And now this narrative is going to be even stronger against them. And they cannot criticize because there will be some, let's take them at their best, there will be some Black people moving out. Now they will be seen as the main choice. Now the Black people who do stay will seem like the weird ones because they didn't choose to opt out of discrimination and they chose to stay for discrimination. So at that point, they will now be blamed for staying as a victim. But next, they talk about the individual right, basically the right to instrumentalize their citizenship, right? One, in the status quo, you already have that because you can get benefits from your nation, like they will give you tax breaks, they will give improve infrastructure and all that. But secondly, if they talk about rich people in poor countries, it's not going to be a benefit anyway because the price of your citizenship of a shitty nation will not be able to gain them any money at all. For example, if we say Indonesia, right? It isn't like the price of citizenship of Indonesia is high. So if you're going to move to the US, you're likely going to have the lower tier citizenship which means that at the end of the day, you don't get the benefit of moving out anyway. Second, they never engage with my previous speaker's argument regarding how rich people in the status quo already fulfill all of the prerequisites anyway. They have the education, they have the work, they have the money, they have all of this. So why can't rich people do that already in the status quo? Not clear at all. So it's very evil for them to prioritize the rich people, not only because their benefit doesn't exist anyway, but secondly, they trade off the poor people. So at the end of the day, it is very poor for them. But let's continue engaging on this. What benefit do poor people get? They say the benefit of pure hard cash. One, this is not really important because at the end of the day, when they move, they will have to, there's going to be a lot of setup costs anyway in their new nation. So it is not going to be as easy as that. And secondly, they're not going forward, they're not going to be able to improve that nation. So reverting back to my previous speaker's point, before I move on, OG.
How about, for example, a rich Chinese Indonesian want to buy American citizenship, so she has a state to go run away from if there ever a pogrom again? Do you think that's not a valid option?
Why is that not a valid option in the status quo? I think it's quite often people who are rich, capable, working, have a job, can go there anyway. So I don't really know how true this is. But secondly, even if you want to have that option, why do you have to impose the price as well? We say using your own merits to get citizenship if you're a rich person is fairer rather than not only doing that, but also pay for the visa, but also pay for the premium citizenship. So even on your side, you're only adding the cost for these Chinese Indonesians who are rich to opt out. So not clear at all. What do you have on our side of the house? If we have people that stay there, we have, my previous speaker already talked about how we can, for someone who is poor, it's better to stay in a country like the US because they have better social welfare and they're going to only improve it going forward. First, you can only have the incentive to improve the living conditions of the poor in a rich nation if they are still there. If the poor people all move out, then there is no incentive to fix their problems, right? So it is not. So the only way for us to keep improving, if the status quo is unideal, is to keep them there and to keep them demanding for better changes. But secondly, most important is that the mechanism of how to improve the developing nations that was not touched on by opening government only exists on our side. Because assuming, yes, the people that opening government talked about, the rich people in Indonesia, if they all move out, then all of Indonesia will have very few rich people that can invest money there. Why will they invest money in the status quo? Because they have the idea that they are stuck in Indonesia, so might as well improve it and get their living conditions better. We are not forcing them to do this. If they want to move out, sure. But if they do have some level of attachment here, we can at least instrumentalize a way for poor people in Indonesia to still gain those benefits. The only way we can entice companies to go to Indonesia and develop this nation as well is only if you have a good amount of market here for people to buy products. If all the rich people and middle class move out, then there's nothing here. So the harm on our side are these people who are left in these developing nations who have no one backing them, no market at all, and no method of improving their lives because now the rich people all moved out. So not only is the individual right harmed by OG, we actually protect the most vulnerable nations on opening opposition. Very proud to oppose.
Thank you for the speech, DLO. To open the closing debate, we call member of government. Here.
Because of connection, can I ask for everyone else to turn off their video? I'm so sorry. Also, can I not use my video as well? I'm just so scared because it got laggy a couple of times.
Yep, all good.
Okay, so also for those who want to POI, just unmute yourself and yeah, say POI. Let me just time myself. I'm going to start in 3, 2, 1. The opening government have debated about the practicality and the possibilities of, whether or not it's only going to be advantage for the super rich people and so on and so forth. We think that CG is going to come in on a more moderate scenario, right? So OG has explained about the principle of statehood and OO has explained about the accessibility and cost of moving. But as closing government, we just think that it's easy. We want to make it easier for people to gain citizenship, to maximize economic freedom and fluidity with exchange of money. We're also going to explain as to how the possession of capital is going to create a more healthier competition within and also between countries. But first of all, just a clarification on our mechanism. We think that what we are against is the currently how the barrier of citizenship is constructed with, right? Because right now the barrier to citizenship is pretty much regulatory. The decision lies more on government and political agenda. On our side of the house, there's not going to be a clear definition from government, for our side, we think that the decision lies more on the individuals that want to sell their citizenship and exchange it with other people. But we want to make sure that there is mechanism in place to ensure minimum guarantee that these people are going to behave in accordance to the law. For example, there cannot be any criminal records for the past years. As the government, we also want to put surveillance to these people and probably put some mechanisms such as obligatory payback to society, such as volunteering in the homes of elderly, right? But second of all, before going on to my arguments, I think that we need to debunk the whole extreme scenario coming from opposition, saying that it's going to be just benefiting for the super rich people. One, we think that in terms of super rich people, they do not need to buy citizenship anyway because they're just isolated from the problems in their countries that can buy anything with money. But second of all, if we're talking about people in extremely bad conditions, such as war-torn countries and refugees, we don't think that also buying and selling citizenship is the solution, because it needs some kind of international cooperation, right? So we don't think that is actually a debate on that. What we want to talk is more on the moderate scenario. We're talking about people having specific passion or type of career choice that you want to pursue and a kind of way of living. That is to say, for example, if you're a travel blogger, you just prefer to live in Thailand and Bali as opposed to the USA or Sweden, because that is not a place for traveling. If you have a career choice in furniture, for example, go to IKEA in Sweden. If you have a passion in traditional fabric, just go to China in India. We believe that people have very niche passion on how they want to live their life and what they want to make money off. And we think that the ability for you to use your capital to buy a citizenship is going to make it easy. But second of all, we think that, look, it's not just going to be just that easy, right, for middle and rich class people to blindly follow the trend and to just move to a richer country regardless of their preferences, regardless of what their career choices, because right now there is an existing counterbalance for them to not move to a richer country. Proof that it's actually not easy for you to be successful or to be richer in the US in comparison, let's say, for example, if you just stay in the Southeast Asian countries where you already have the middle class advantage. There are also economic uncertainty and political turmoil even in the most advanced countries, right? We think also there are incentives existing for people from richer country to finally buy their way to a less developed country, such as, because there are also people frustrated with US, for example. There are too competitive, too capitalist and fast-paced life, and want to have a more laid-back way of living because they genuinely believe it's a more healthy way of living, right? So going to my argumentations. First of all, we think that we're going to give greater economic fluidity for people. This definitely applies for people who have a unique and specific expertise, right? And they want to go to country for that, right? We think that it's going to apply on a moderate scenario, right? Because these are not extra rich people, but these are people with aspiration and passions that can only be pursued in a certain country, right? The thing is, there are significant barrier of entry that is very, very hard to be break. For example, if you want to go to the US to pursue art and interior design, even though you are good at it, you need multiple layers of selection to finally obtain that citizenship. And it's going to be administrative. You need a referral letter, not only from a professional, but also your neighbor. You need a lawyer to defend as to why you're going to contribute to the nation. And even if you have to work under a visa after a certain time, and because your student visa actually going to expire really fast. No. And there's also the thing is, there's also internal issue, right? Because in the nation itself, they're going to always favoritism for their own citizens when they want to obtain the job. And even if at the very best scenario, when you finally are be able to pursue your passion as a citizenship in that nation, right? When you settle, you already lose a certain good amount of year, which is your most productive year to be successful at the end of the day. The the point is the barrier of entry right now is very regulatory and based on political agenda. Government cannot allow too many migrants, for example, because there is a rising white supremacist. There is a limit put to the number of migrants according to which country they come from that can be part of the nation, regardless how rich the migrants are. That means even if you have accumulated a massive amount of capital, but because you don't fall under the quota, then you can just be rejected. At best, ladies and gentlemen, we still believe that this is unsustainable because it can be easy now when it's not Donald Trump leading the USA, but it can be very, very hard later to obtain his citizenship later, right? No. But the conclusion is when we have selling and buying citizenship, it's up to the individual decision whether or not they want to quickly sell the citizenship for the exchange of money. And we think that it's much more sustainable and it creates fluidity for people. No. But second of all, we think that it's going to create a fairer and healthier economic competition. Look, we think that in terms of global economy, this is actually going to create a good contribution because now nations are going to focus more on building their own niche economy. Korea, for example, because of their K-pop, they actually managed to attract multiple migrants from all over the world to audition as K-pop stars. We think that right now it's going to incentivize countries like China, for example, who is just generally wanting to attract, want to build its economy under the basis of cheap labor and under the basis of because they have so many populations and so on and so forth, to finally afford this kind of niche economy because they're going to question why people are flocking outside the country. So it's going to rethink its economic, its economic strategy as to how they can attract much more migrant workers to their country, right? But we believe, in addition to that, we think that the possession of capital as an exchange for citizenship is actually going to be much meaningful for a certain economy to build its niche economy, ladies and gentlemen, because we have people that owns money investing in particular niche businesses that they are truly, truly passionate on. We have people consuming certain niche types of art or fashion and the food that they like in that country. And we think that's going to empower the identity of the country. At the end of the day, we believe that we are the only team in the entire debate that simulates how the world is going to operate, and given both the justification and the practical implication, we are very proud to oppose. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for the speech. To open the case of closing opposition, we call member of opposition. Here.
Give me a thumbs up if I'm audible. All right.
Yep.
Just realized that everyone's video is off, so the thumbs up doesn't really work. Anyway. Speech start in 4, 3, 2, 1. I think it is true what Satrio said. He said that a lot of the argument that exists in this debate talks about why immigration is something that is inherently bad. And I do agree to that. I think the differentiation between what governments, immigration and this particular proposal is the prerequisite of you entering a new country. Under our side, the prerequisite of entering a new country means that you need to go through massive amounts of process, means that you have to go through massive amount of indoctrination, knowledge, and etc. in order to enter that particular country in the very first place. Now, under side proposition, the prerequisite shift. It now talks about how much capital that you have in the very first place, and this is going to ruin the political dynamic that exists inside the country. Because something that is really exclusive about citizenship and exists in every single part of the world is the ability to enter the political spectrum. And either under their side, individual who comes in that doesn't really understand about the political spectrum of the country, doesn't really have attachment towards that new country to begin with. Like, for example, in the United States, you need to stay for a couple of years before you get citizenship. It's going to destroy all of that, where your only interest is like what CG says, purely based on economic. But before that, let's kick opening debate out of here, because opening debate talks only about why the result would be bad and good. I think there are massive variables that would do this, and we could debate entire day and it will not be done. What we're going to talk about, that regardless about the result, you are morally obligated as a citizen of a certain country to that particular country in the very first place. Our argument is important because regardless of the result, if we can prove to you that this is the case, that they are morally obligated to the country, regardless of the result being bad or good, it is not correct to do. I don't understand why CG is important in this debate, because they mainly talk about minuscule things such as your passion in art and etc. Right? Number one, this is incredibly exclusive because the rate of globalization has increased. Exactly what she said about South Korea and how it has modernized in the current status quo and westernization has come. But secondly, I think if we can prove to you that the cost is significantly larger, we can win this debate, because the cost of my passion is not worth it for the ruination of the political spectrum inside a single country. Two arguments. Firstly, how this moral obligation comes. Secondly, how this political dynamic will shift inside government. We give you 4 reasons why these individuals are morally obligated to their country. Number one, government might say that, oh, it is entirely arbitrary, right? That they are born in this particular country, hence they should be able to move. I don't think arbitrariness doesn't devoid you of obligation. It is entirely arbitrary that out of thousands of sons that my dad has, I was the one that was chosen to be born. But I was born anyway, and my parents still has moral obligation to me. I think special relation and special obligation can still come. Why? Because just like my parents decided, he has decided to birth me in the very first place. State has also done this. State has decided to build a concept of a nation and take care of a certain amount of individual. And these numbers of individual needs to fulfill a certain prerequisite. So you cannot simply say that their special relation is simply gone just because it is arbitrary. Because if that is the case, then all life in this world doesn't need any forms of moral obligation and doesn't have to fulfill any moral obligation because all life is arbitrary anyway, right? Thirdly, individual that is special will come to this. Thank you, CG, for amending it. Are most likely going to be individual who has some sense amount of capital to begin with, who has the capacity to move and such, not the super rich. No, thank you. Now, individual who has gained this capital owe it to the poor in their country to begin with, because the reason why they are rich in the capitalist structure is out of the sacrifice of hundreds of thousands of people who have suffered in this developing country for the sake of them, providing them the goods that they have, being able to ensure that they can have a good business cycle at the end of the day. Okay, let's say that you are marginalized. Let's say that you are women who live in a country that is very patriarchal, and you are LGBTQ community that live in a very conservative country, right? We say that rich marginalized can only be the one that moves under their side, but rich marginalized has benefit from the community too, right? Individual who is poor and cannot access this particular right to move into that country has provided this rich individual, not rich, let's say moderately rich, has provided this moderately rich individual a community that accepts them, that has given them a special relation, that take care of them, right? And I think they owe it to the smaller community to at least make a difference, because these are the type of individuals that can make a difference. If you are poor, most likely you cannot make a difference, but if you are a middle class, you can engage in political spectrum, you can engage in a discourse, you can engage or even be a political candidate that are able to do all of these things. And I think changes under the worsened country is going to be significantly reduced. So the political capital create changes in a country that is deemed to be less desirable is going to significantly ruin and would significantly destroy every single person in the world. We have already told you in conclusion that this individual has the moral obligation towards their community. Not only that, the fact that their own upbringing comes at the cost of other people, but because of it is arbitrary, doesn't mean that you do not have moral obligation. Secondly, in terms of political dynamic, right? How would political dynamic shift inside government? No, thank you. I think government proposal is significantly the same with the American dream that exists back then. Back then, when US opened their border, for example, and a lot of Hispanic individuals come to their country and such, right? Something that CG has contributed to and such, right? Because the barrier will be significantly lower and such, right? So the difference is number and accessibility. Why is that the number of individuals from a single class citizen moves into a larger area or to a new area or to a new country is something that's significantly dangerous? Because selling citizenship means you have the right to vote in the political spectrum, means you have the right to suddenly shift the political spectrum policy and such inside that country. Why is this dangerous? Because notice that their interest is self-based, not on the basis of the ideation of the country, not on the basis of the community, but purely on their own economic benefit. Since they come for economic freedom, something that CG has considered, right? This means what type of policy that is going to sit under side government? The type of policy is going to be dangerous for three reasons. Firstly, it's going to be harder to create a policy that focuses on economic empowerment. Things such as affirmative action, things such as ensuring that there are more taxation to the rich, because that would significantly benefit or destroys the middle class of that society to begin with, right? This means that socialist forms of policy in order to help the poor inside a rich country would be significantly lessened, because now the political spectrum is significantly shifted by individuals from the middle class or higher upper class, right? There will be a reduced number of individuals who comes from the lower class. Sure, you might say, oh, they're going to move a new country and then, they're going to exist in developing country, but that's the problem, right? You're going to be removed and move to a certain place that is going to be significantly worse for a lower class to exist in. Secondly, it reduces the meaning of democracy. If political participation means that you can solve individuals' right to participate in politics, it would lessen the sovereignty of the democracy in that country. Because everyone would think the decision was not made by my fellow citizen, but was made by the contribution of a massive numbers of outsiders. So the political efficacy and the sovereignty of the government under their side is going to be significantly reduced. Thirdly, and lastly, what happens during the American Dream is that there's going to be massive amount of discrimination and government scapegoating the Mexican that comes to the United States, etc. And this is something that politicians has done for years. Or even worse, even if they are good people, they're going to be created as a model minority, like Asian in the United States, where they see that Asian can do A, B, C, D, but Black people cannot do A, B, C, D, and hence blame them, etc. Right? So notice that when they come in a massive amount of number, it would not only that it would reduce the meaning of democracy, so all types of policy that would come on the side government will be significantly reduced in terms of meaning, but will also make other minority life worse, or even make their own life worse there because of the political spectrum in that country. Very proud to oppose.
Guys, gue minta maaf banget, gue kebanyakan minum, jadi gue harus ke WC lagi. Thank you. I'm back. Thank you.
Okay, to close the case of the government bench, we call government whip. Here.
Okay. Am I audible?
Yep.
Okay. Wait. I'm gonna start my speech in 3, 2, 1. It's a shame that Gita's argument has never been properly engaged by side closing opposition. We came to you here explaining in the best way possible upon why this would be the most likely scenario that would happen. They cannot come in here with a principle that is half-hearted, only to say that our depiction of the world is non-existent. We have come here and stated to you that unfortunately sectorals in every country operates differently. An architecture graduate from Indonesia would be paid minimum wage, and before he is dead, before maybe he has amassed a lot of years to have good productivity, the structure in Indonesia would never change. It is beneficial and easier for him to move to Singapore when you are paid 40 to 50 millions of Indonesian euros, of Indonesian rupiahs. We think it's better for us to have an ease, to have better sectoral change, and it will also impact the people inside the economy and corporations within that specific country. 3 things in my speech. Number 1, we're going to engage in the idea of closing opposition and why it should be not counted inside this debate. Second of all, we're going to talk about people who are marginalized. We're going to talk a bit also about pricing and market crash brought to you by the opening opposition. And last but not least, we're going to re-engage inside Gita's debate. And if it comes in closing, it will be too late for you to respond. Shame on you. Number 1, let's talk about the principle, right? Basically, CO came here and they said that the rich have an obligation for the poor because they have benefited so much. We don't think so. We think, and we think that an obligation to help the poor does not rely upon the rich. It relies upon the government to distribute the wealth and to create policies that would be beneficial to the poor. That is saying that if the rich is paying their taxes, if they are law-abiding citizens, it is already enough of a reparation and obligation for them to do their jobs. If your problem is redistribution of wealth, then you should target the government as to why they are not taxing the rich enough, or they are not having better incentives for them to help the poor escape. We think this is a scapegoating what is actually an individual ability for you to accumulate wealth and also to have a good livelihood of your choice. So we don't think that that's a proper engagement. But second of all, let's also talk about your idea upon political participation and engagement. Number one, we don't think that the high aspiration of or degree inside politics would be something that's majority, because like everything else that Gita has mentioned, politics is also part of a career, meaning that the people who would deep dive upon it, it's only a small and targeted number of individuals. It's going to be political dynasties, and it's going to be individual people who already have an interest in it, people who would not become part of this debate because they wouldn't want to move anyways, because they have an interest to govern in politics. We think that the obligation for you inside as an average citizen, if you don't want to engage inside politics, it's only to vote. And we think that the kind of self-decision making for you to vote exists cross borders. We're talking about things like healthcare and education and minimum wage that is applicable even when you're moving across countries. And it becomes good enough understanding for you to understand whether or not an individual is paid enough, whether or not women is represented enough. It's an issue that happens cross borders, and we think it's not going to be solved anyways under side opposition. But second of all, let's also talk about marginalized people. We think that we cannot dictate what kind of choice or long-term probabilities would happen, because in cases of people moving from places like Venezuela when there's a large financial crisis, a lot of the times the reason that they move is because they want to have better economic ability for them to live, and they would be okay probably with the possible racism, because we think that the trade-off here is a guaranteed economic betterment versus a probable second generation of things like model minority or racism. So in that scenario, we think that the kind of trade-off would also be better on the outside of the house. Third of all, let's talk about pricing, something that is, a big issue on their side of the government. We don't think so. We think that like any kind of trade and capitalist structure, it's okay for you to sell at the highest bidder, and there will always be market regulations upon it. We don't think why this is an unjust way for us to accumulate capital, because it does not exist in a vacuum. Things like government bonds, exchange rates, and values of money would always be surging upon what the country has and how it operates economically. It's not exclusive benefit under your world. No. We think that the burden of opposition then is to say why to have a statehood that relies upon economic benefits is something that is an unbalanced trade or even an unjust trade, something that have not properly explained and therefore should be counted out of debate. The trade-off that we have is that if we engage, the impact would be bigger, to say that economic tool of the country would have more ways for them to self-regulate and do policies. It's the same kind of things with interest rate, where you raise it up and down within recession and inflation. You can also adjust the pricing. So when you need more labor of a certain sector, for example, you heighten the pricing of the citizenship, and then you lower it when you are needing more benefits or more counterbalances on your part. So we think under all of that, we have proven to you that there are countermeasures also still happening under our side. But last but not least, let's engage inside Gita's argument, and it's a very important argument. It is to say that a lot of the times, the kinds of institutions propagated inside a country is harder to change. What am I talking about? Gita has explained to you about things like institution and why it's hard to build sectorals. It took Japan 20 years to build their economic tech industry, for example. It took Germany longer to establish universities for engineering. These kinds of length is hard for you to replicate. By the time that institutions or investment is going in, you would already die, or you would already be of not productive age. That means you're letting people have a zero-sum game of staying inside a specific country and not getting any kinds of benefit that they will get in another country. And this is prevalent in things like niche industries of pottery. We're talking about sectors of K-pop. We're talking about tech. We're talking about sectors of Bangalore, for example. and it's not relevant on their opposition side. But second of all, it's also the idea of investment. The fact that stability will come late, you have to prove results first, because there's diversification of investment portfolio. Under all of that, the better trade-off would be for expertise to come in with niche skills. That is to say that if a company wants a niche pottery to be rooted in a background of Southeast Asian influence, for example, that is a specific benefit and a specific contribution. It can only happen when you have such a diverse fluidity of talent of people coming in from Southeast Asia at a large scale and transforming that industry. Under all of those benefits, we think that we have best capitulate how the world is going to operate. It's not going to be as destructive as our opposition is in placing, and definitely you should count on all of the probable arguments coming in by closing opposition. We are very proud to close this debate. Thank you.
Thank you, Government Whip. To conclude the debate, we call Opposition Whip. Here.
Am I audible?
Yep.
My speech will start in 3, 2, 1. Is everybody talking about how economy is going to be bad, how economy is going to be good. The problem is that they never really explain to you that why economy policy could exist. Economy policy coming from the discussion of economy to discuss what is the economy direction of certain country, what kind of economy policy and monetary policy that's going to be done. So it's all of this kind of policy created by a legislative process that's inherently contingent to a political dynamic of a country. Hence, all the idea of benefit of the economy or harm of economy should be relied on an explanation about how the political dynamic would looks like, which an exclusive benefit and contribution comes from causing opposition. Nobody talk about that. Even Xi Jinping dismisses but never respond to that kind of case. Let's deal with opening government. So opening government on a practical talk about, you at some extent will contribute back to your country, because before you go, you're going to build business and contribute to your country. That never even explain to you that how the contribution would look like and how it's going to be very significant. It's an even mechanism, because the moment you build your business, you're not contribute to the country, but you exploit and gather resources in your country for your own benefit and leave that country. You compete with another businesses, killing another businesses so your own business can stand out, then you leave your country. We think it's practically very evil for you to just kill certain people lives, then you just run away from all of that responsibility. Opening government never justify to you why it's okay for you to prioritize one or two individuals, then move comparative to the livelihood of every single other citizen in that country. They cannot win this debate. So you need to understand, even if we agree that they have certain right, but your right can be limited the moment when your right indirectly or directly harm other people. For an example, in a gun control policy, you can limit someone's right to protect themselves, because at some extent it also can harm other people. So we think at some extent states have right to limit their choices and limit their right, because they can harm other people. But here's the thing, Seiji come out and say that, rich do not oblige to do so, because the obligation should go to government, because rich already provide tax. Shame on government Whip, because they never explain to you that why it isn't enough payback toward the exploitation that they already did. Because tax only takes more part of the exploitation that you did. So if you want to make the payback even and fulfill, it takes a very long time. But under the side of the house, before these rich people already fulfill their obligation to pay back, they're already able to run away from their responsibility. That is why it's not even they should stay into this kind of country. So here's the thing. The problem with the CG case is very, very funny because they say that they don't want their contact is not super rich people is going to move. I'll explain to you that why the one that will move is super rich people. Here's the thing. Yeah, they say that they want to have pursuit of career and pursuit of passion. Most likely they're going to move to a certain country. For example, most likely they're going to move to the developed country. They're not going to move to Thailand if they want to pursue career, for example, because career is talking about job. It's talking about the selling of services, something that's highly contingent and characteristic of developed country. Because Hong Kong, they're concentrated their industry to service selling, for an example, and more job opportunity, for an example. So most likely it's going to move to countries like USA, Hong Kong, that by the market nature, it's going to be very, very expensive for that. But even if it's just a moderate people, I will explain and deal with that. You need to understand, under the side of the house, probably the one that can fulfill their passion is only the rich or even moderate people, ladies and gentlemen. But poor people that passionate as well, passion that opening or closing government talk really important, it's not going to be fulfilled. Then the question is that their benefit only goes for some people that can escape. So their benefit is very, very small. So there's not going to be a crazy change of niche economy if the one that moves is going to be very small, like what they say at the very beginning since OG until CG. So I don't understand that why their case is very important in this debate. People that stay in that country, poor, passionate people, will not have chance to develop their passion, because if it's true that all of the rich people that have the same passion already goes to another country, the country have no interest to talk about that kind of passion or give a platform for that. So most likely, poor people with that passion, they will kill their passion. So I don't understand that why CG want to prioritize passion but also kill other people's passion at the same time. But moreover, create a niche market doesn't mean that you need to move everyone around. Within the status quo, you're already able to create a niche market by your natural resources that you have. For some country that have, like in USA, for example, they have a good mining, they're really good at selling steel, for example, or Indonesia or Thailand is very good with their rice. I think that all of the natural resources they have is practically already enough to create their niche market. So I don't see any reason that why you need to move people, and I don't see that significant change under their side of the house, ladies and gentlemen. But if you move people, it will entirely change the political dynamic, ladies and gentlemen. You need to understand, rich people, like all of the people or everyone that you're talking about, is move because they only care about themselves. The question is that is if they able to betray their previous country for their own personal benefit, we also think that they also could do the same thing in this new country. Most likely, if they're super rich, they will be promoting a candidate, the nominate candidate that only goes to their favor, for an example, or even if they are moderate people, when everybody can move there, practically they're going to nominate the number and they will create a new voter base for some people. For an example, I'm not going to take away almost 6. So most likely, it's also going to change political dynamic. They never justify to you why new people that never feel the grievances of the black people in that certain country justify to invade the country and nominate the full thing on political dynamic and change the overall progress that already exists there. They never justify that. But if you want to build economy and niche economy like what Goff Ben said, then you also need to talk about the directions of the policy making and the directions of that political discussion. Because even if they say that, oh, the people will move and create a niche economy market for each different country, but these people, they will get into the country, will be super diverse, we will create a very fucked up political discussion or even a very selfish political discussion. So even if you have niche economy market, but the policy of pricing, for an example, the policy of trading, for an example, is more than just having a niche market. But your trading partner, for example, choosing your trading partner, putting a price cap, for an example, all of that would highly relate to your political intention and political discussion, which would be very bad if dominated by people that do not origin for this kind of country. So even if they have economy benefit and market, but as long as political and every other policy inside the country is going to be very bad because of these selfish people, everything will be ruined out. There will be no benefit at all. I'm very proud to close this debate.
The speech, closing opposition. So for maybe just if we are.
Yes, hi everyone. For the debaters, please leave the Zoom meeting and we will have the announcement later. For the adjudicators, I have set up a breakout room for you guys to deliberate in. I am sending you the invites now.
Right.
Thank you everyone for the debate.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Hi adjudicators, please join the breakout room. Thank you.
Krista, turn off the live.